This is the first year I've been able to look at the emerging daffodils without feeling cold and empty. I remember him coming to visit me, looking so gaunt, the man that was muscular like his dad, a labourer's body. He sat across from me, his brown eyes looking larger in his skinny face. Told me he was glad that he managed to see the daffodils again before he... Every spring I've watched the beginnings of new life bursting from the ground and the newborn lambs bouncing around the fields. And all I saw was him, my son, dying in a hospital bed. He died on Good Friday. The date made it worse. I prayed and cursed at God. And he sent his son down as a sacrifice. And he died for all our sins. That's what it says. And yet there I was, watching my son die for his own sins. So many mothers around the world, all seeing their children shrivel to nothing until they were gone. I cursed God, saying it was his choice to sacrifice his own son. How dare he do it to mine? He was 34 when he died, about the same age as Jesus when he was crucified. No age. I'd have swapped places with him. I wish I'd known. And there were so many clues when I look back on it. And one conversation haunts me. He was round to stay at my house one weekend with his daughter, Laura, and Judith, his wife. I was having one of me rants. There never used to be so many gay people when I was young. Nowadays they're all coming out, especially if they're famous. I don't know why. Perhaps it's trendy to be gay, or maybe it's the contraceptive pill. Judith laughed. Asked me how the pill could make people gay. So I told her. When women take the pill, they wee out estrogen and it gets into the water supply. Judith scoffed. She's such a know-it-all. Thinks I'm thick. But Stephen, my son, went quiet. I pressed him for his opinion and he shrugged and talked about stigma and illegality and changing views, like he was a world expert. Now that night I overheard a row from the guest bedroom. I didn't get it all, but it sounded like she wanted sex and he didn't. I thought perhaps he was having an affair. And as much as I didn't take to Judith, I worried that they would split up and I wouldn't get to see Laura as much. He'd been a strange boy when he was at school. Once they'd done a school play and someone had taken photos. The teacher asked him to write the numbers down of the photos that he wanted. She called me later and said that all the photos that Stephen had chosen were of a boy called David in the year above, and there were none of him. She said she'd changed the numbers so that I got some of Stephen, and I didn't ask him why he'd done that, but perhaps I should have. He hated secondary school. He was disruptive, angry, unpopular with the other boys. Then he joined the gardening club, and the man that ran it got them helping the council roadside landscapers. He helped plant the daffodils on the roundabout and up the verges in the village. He seemed to enjoy the company of the council workers too. He loved the colour yellow after that and bought a yellow bomber jacket, which, like bees to pollen, seemed to attract a lot of girls. When he left school, he got a job with the council. and took one of the bees, Judith, as his wife. She wasn't a pretty girl, a bit boyish, but she was good with him, understanding of his moods. And then Laura came along, and his dad and me thought, well, our work was done. Then he went missing for a week, walked out the door like he was off to work and didn't come back. I started thinking that this affair idea might be true and he'd run off with another woman. When I broached it with Judith, oh, she cried like a trapped animal. She was more worried that he might have taken his own life. He'd been in a strange mood. She said his body had been with her, but his mind seemed to be constantly somewhere else. The police were very good, but in the end he came back without their help. He had a sore on his head and he looked very pale. And that's when he told us he'd been HIV positive for the last year. And before he went away, he found out he had full-blown AIDS. He was going to die. And he'd gone to Tenby, where our family had holidayed, to clear his head. To have a week where he didn't have to tell us. I told people he died of leukemia. I felt ashamed of the man I'd discovered he was. Judith had found male porn videos in the back of his wardrobe when she was clearing his clothes. I mean, he kept all that from us. Made me so sad. I mean, if I'd known what he was doing, I would have slipped a packet of condoms into his coat pocket. It took me a while to realise that all my rants and my attitude towards people that were different had caused him not to tell me. Had to pretend that he was heterosexual. Even at his funeral, some men turned up that I didn't know, and I refused to talk to them in case they were his lovers. I missed out on discovering a part of his life that made me feel uncomfortable. My own boy. The other day, I was at a WI meeting and a new lady asked me how my son had died. And I took a deep breath and I told her. He died of AIDS. She swallowed hard and then said so had her son. But she'd never told anyone before. We hugged. Two strangers seeing themselves in each other. If you're wondering why I can look at the daffodils and smile this year, it's because Laura is expecting and the due date is Easter Sunday. They've already found out it's a boy, so to me it feels like resurrection. His DNA living on. And I'm going to be the best great grandma in the world. And I'll make sure he can tell me everything and anything.